not gonna lie, I've not even started painting this piece yet, and I am so close to giving up already. I've spent like all of last night, well, probably about 3 hours last night looking for a reference photo, and then it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon now, and I spent all morning since I've been up looking for reference photos for this piece. I've just not been able to find one that I like until now. I've got 4 potential ones. Let me flip the camera around and show you. So these are the 4 images that I like. I'm going with this one in the bottom right-hand corner, and I'll tell you why throughout the video, but I'm definitely liking these 3 as well, and I think these will be future videos as well and future paintings because I just love them so much. Now that I've finally found a reference photo, I'm going to get started with the painting. And by getting started with the painting, obviously I mean painting the white canvas white with an extra coat of white gesso. There's this stupid little bit of paper that's stuck to the canvas that I can't peel off with my fingers. You can get it with a palette knife. Always check your canvases to make sure they are in good condition and don't have little bits of rubbish stuck to them. Do you know when you're painting a house and like you want white walls and you go to the DIY store and there's like 20 million different colours of white, and you pick a white and you come and paint it over your white walls and it's completely pointless and you may as well have just not started to begin with? That's what this feels like. It just feels completely pointless. I'm just painting white over white, but it is useful for the paintings. Even though it seems a little bit sort of like pointless, why am I painting this white paint over the top of this white canvas? All this is going to do is just fill in a couple of those like little grainy bits on the canvas that little bit more. It's going to make the canvas a little bit smoother, which means it's going to be a little bit nicer to paint on, especially if I decide to go into like lots of detail work with smaller brushes. Having that smoother surface with the prepared gesso canvas just makes that so much easier. Now that that's done, I've got to wait for it to dry, and before I can start painting, I've got to get my reference photo sorted. So I've got to prepare that, make sure it's the right scale for the painting, and I've also got to tidy up all of the crap from the last painting that I've just done. Clean all that palette, clean all that palette, clean all that palette down there. So I've got a lot of things to do before I can actually start painting. A little spray of some water and some glass cleaner and all of that dry paint just peels off the palette so easily. You don't even need fancy equipment to peel it off. I do have this palette scraper that I use for my big glass palette, but I don't use this for my grey palette because I'm scared of it scratching and I don't want that one to scratch because it's a bit more expensive. So instead, I can use this plastic palette knife, which is perfect for scraping away that paint. It doesn't scratch it, and when I use the glass cleaner and the water with it, it peels away so easily, just with this plastic flimsy thing. So you don't need anything special. Glass palettes are my absolute favourite palette for painting, whether it's acrylics or oils. They are brilliant because they're so easy to clean. The only downside to them is if you want to have your palette vertical like this, all your paint just goes down the palette, which is obviously no good for anyone. But as long as you use them relatively flat, then they are fantastic. And if you did want to do it vertically, you can do that with like a wooden palette, or you can just use slightly thicker paints. But because I use water, makes it all runny, and it's no good with the glass palette. So I keep my palettes nice and flat on the desk, just like that. Gonna mix up these colours now. I'm actually taking the colours from a slightly different photo that I preferred the colour scheme of, and I'm going to mix those up, and then I'm going to try and apply that to the reference photo that I want to use. So we'll see how that goes. I've got my paints all laid out, so all my colours here that I'm going to use, as well as some greys, which if I need to desaturate any of these colours, I can mix them with some of the various greys just to reduce that saturation a little bit and make it look a little bit more lifelike. I've got a nice big clean space here for mixing those colours. I've been trying to refresh my drawing ability lately, so one of the ways that I've been doing that is trying to use the grid method a little bit more rather than using projectors. I'm just basically trying to get my eye for shapes and proportions in, and I think using the grid method just helps to simplify those shapes a little bit more and helps like get things in the right place. Rather than drawing an outline first with a pencil, I thought I would allow myself to be a little bit more free with this painting and block in the basic shapes using paint and a 1-inch flat brush. I'm just keeping the block in simple, just using a couple of colours, a yellow, a green and a burnt sienna. I don't want anything too precise or too complex, I'm just trying to block in the basic large shapes and structures. I'm not really even focusing on lights and shadows at this stage, just the proportions. Then once that blocking was done, I used a pencil just to refine the drawing that little bit more, just to see how close I was basically. And I also didn't want to restrict myself right from the get-go with the pencil drawing, so I wanted to have that little bit of freedom first. I'm blocking in the background with the same brush, and then also using a smaller filbert brush to block in the darkest areas of the painting. So not everywhere, just some of the darkest darks, like the eyes, the nose, and some of the fur detail in the mane. Not even going into real detail, that was the wrong word, but going into the just where those shadowy areas are. I've got a bit of a blocking done with this piece now. There's still a very, very long way to go before it's going to be finished. And I'm not even sure what this is going to look like when it's done, because I don't really have a clear idea of what it's going to be when it's finished. I don't know whether I'm going to do this more abstract or whether I'm going to do this with oil paints after the acrylic layer, or I'm going to try and do it really photorealistic. I just have absolutely no clue for this piece. I'm just going to try and put some paint on, and I'm going to decide as I go with the painting. Which, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best idea. I do think it is incredibly important for wildlife artists in particular, or portrait artists. In fact, anyone that is trying to capture some form of real life or realism, that you do have an idea of how the painting is going to look in your mind before you actually start the painting. There's this story about Michelangelo, I'm not sure how true it is, but basically his father didn't want him using his hands for his work, so he wasn't allowed to sculpt or create. So what Michelangelo did was go and sit by a massive block of marble and just stare at it for months on end without using his hands. He was planning in his head what he was going to do and what was happening, and for those 4 months he did nothing but stare and think. And then 3 years later, that giant block of marble became the statue of David. And I think that's what I want to bring back into my work. I want that little bit more forethought for the paintings. I don't want to just see a nice photo that I like and think, oh, that'll make a nice painting, and then start painting it. I want to plan it, I want to see if I can improve it. I want to take the time to think about how I can make the best possible painting I can. One of the ways that I'm going to start doing that is by using sketchbooks more. Yeah, so I've got a great idea for a video that is all planned out, like scene by scene. I know exactly what I'm going to do, but the problem is it's going to take like 2 months to actually create that video, and I need a sponsor for it. So if you know anyone, please do drop me a message. I want to be able to create these amazing paintings, and I think my limiting factor at the moment is time. So I need to give myself the time to actually practice, and also actually give myself time to be patient with the process of painting. At the moment, because of YouTube, because of like social media pressures, I'm feeling like I have to paint things quite quickly. So like this painting actually originally started because I was like, right, I need something that I can do in a couple of days and I can just knock it out and it'll be good for a YouTube video. But I found the composition that I liked, and it would be a shame to just do something quick with this composition. So now I really want to take the time to try and produce a really great piece of artwork rather than just rush through it. And I'm really glad I made that decision because of what happens next. I woke up this morning and I decided I really don't like where this painting is going at the moment, and I think the main reason for that is because I don't really have a plan. So I'm gonna do a couple of little bits to it and then sit down and make a new plan basically, and hopefully try and get an idea that I like. I said I wasn't gonna do any more paintings without planning them, and I really want to take a little bit more time with my paintings, and I've not done that with this piece. I just sort of jumped straight into it just because I wanted to get a bit of painting done and I needed a video for YouTube, and I'm just not enjoying the creation of this piece just yet. So I'm gonna pause it and make some edits to it and then see if I can get an idea that I actually like. Before I do all of that though, I'm actually gonna do something a little bit more drastic and sand off some of this thicker paintwork. I don't really like it, so I'm going to get rid of it. The last little thing that I'm going to do is just put some more gesso back over this. It's a bit too dark, it's a bit too saturated for what I had in mind, so I'm going to put a thin layer of gesso over it, just by spraying some water onto the surface of the canvas. Getting a little bit of my gesso, not too much, and just very, very lightly just rubbing it over the surface of the painting. Still want to be able to see what's underneath. Just knocking it back slightly, and also putting in another bit of ground for the next layers of paint to go over the top of. Put a little bit more opaque gesso in the corners, just getting rid of some of those grid lines now. Don't really need those anymore. I am going to paint over it. It's not going to stay white, but may as well just get rid of them. Same in the top corner over there. And then I'm going to leave it like that, and you're going to have to wait until the next video to find out what I do to this painting.